Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Sarah Black, and we're happy to be with you guys today. Um, we we have a little bit of information today that we thought we would share, just big picture about H2A and Great Lakes Ag Labor Services, but we want it to be informal. So if you guys have questions along the way, you can pop them in the chat and they will monitor the chat. And at the end, we'll also hopefully have some time to be able to do questions live if there's time left. Can you guys see the presentation? Okay. I am not seeing it. It went away when Wendy started it. So let's see if we can get back to it. I still don't see it. Right.
Maybe if you want to stop sharing and then reshare again.
Okay.
That would help.
Yeah, it was up there, Wendy, until your picture came up and then it's gone. I'm sorry. Apologies as we fix technology.
Totally okay.
Okay, are we good now?
There we go. Yep.
All right. So first off, we wanted to start with some introductions. I am Sarah Black. I'm General Manager with Great Lakes Ag Labor Services, but have been on the Michigan Farm Bureau staff for about 30 years and actually serve in a joint role, Director of Business Operations with Michigan Farm Bureau and running this affiliate company that we started a few years back. So I have a lot of history. Grew up on a dairy farm in kind of central eastern Michigan and have spent my entire professional career working for Farm Bureau, working with county farm bureaus, working in the policy and legislative arena, and then recently since 2020, working with Great Lakes Ag Labor Services. So happy to be here today. I'll pass it to Laura.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Herregers. I have been with Great Lakes Ag for about 7 years. I am one of the account managers, so I file H2A and H2B contracts, and then I also head up marketing. I live on the west side of the state of Michigan, and my husband and I, we farm asparagus, tart cherries, and apples.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Klingbeil. I am also an account manager and have been working with Great Lakes Ag for the last year. Before that, I actually was the ag teacher in Cambridge, Wisconsin for 13 years. So I've spent a big chunk of time in Wisconsin, and I'm excited to spend this afternoon with you all as well. I grew up in Michigan on a dairy farm, and I've also spent some time on the US-Mexico border working for a youth missions organization as well. So I'm excited to spend the afternoon with you.
Awesome. So let's start with just a brief background of who Great Lakes Ag Labor is and why Farm Bureau in Michigan decided to take this venture. We are an affiliate company of Michigan Farm Bureau, so we're housed in the same office as Michigan Farm Bureau in Lansing. And we actually started as a result and at the request of our Farm Bureau members here in Michigan that were really struggling with trying to find adequate labor and knew that there were these H programs available, but had heard and had seen with others that they were complicated and expensive and fraught with litigation if not done correctly. So our members came to Farm Bureau and said, could you study this? Could you see if it would be a viable option for Farm Bureau to figure out some sort of an H2A program service for members? And so that's what we did. We ran it as a pilot the first year in 2014, 10 years ago, and worked with 5 farms to learn how to do the process from A to Z and to really understand what types of services our members needed to be successful. The Farm Bureau set our company up as an agent. So it's important to understand that we're not a farm labor contractor, and there are differences in models that we will talk about a little bit today through our presentation. But know that we're an agent model, which means we do all of the filing and all of the services, but once the workers get to your farm, they're your employees, you do the payroll, you handle the day-to-day management of that labor and have the control over it. We are the largest H2A agent filing in Michigan, and we also file now in Ohio and Indiana, and new this year in Texas and Wisconsin. A little bit just big picture about H2A and what it is. If you're new to it or you know a little bit about it, or maybe you haven't heard about it at all, it really is meant to be to provide a seasonal workforce, temporary or seasonal. They are legal guest workers here on a employment visa. They're not immigrants, they're employment-based visas, and H-2A is meant to be for agricultural jobs. It has a very time-specific, complicated filing and processing to get all the way through to actually get the workers to your farm. So you do want to try to work with somebody that knows what they're doing because there are a lot of steps involved. One of the benefits of H-2A is that the program is uncapped. So it really fits any type and size of farm. It's a common misnomer that H-2A is only for farms that need hundreds of workers that are hand harvesting crops. Well, that's not the case. You can bring one worker or you can bring 200 or however many you need. So it's an uncapped program, which is nice. One of the drawbacks to the program is that it's not year round. It is meant to be for seasonal and to supplement your workforce. So you still do have to go through a whole process to recruit workers domestically, and we can talk more about that. There are different types of application models, and this is a little bit what I was referencing. A fixed site is where a agent would help you apply for the contract, or you could do it on your own, but you maintain control of the workforce and you as the grower pay all of the filing fees, the agency fees, etc. You do the payroll, you have full control of that workforce. A farm labor contractor, however, as a contrast, would contract with you for all the employment services. So you essentially would get an invoice from the farm labor contractor for all of his services, and they maintain full control of the workforce. You would just pay them the payroll plus whatever service charge that they charge for what they do, and they oftentimes have a workforce that they can move to different farms that are on their contract. So it's a completely different model. Joint employer is a model that used to be fairly common prior to the Department of Labor changing their rules last year, where farms could actually file together as joint employers and then share all of the fees associated with filing H-2A. But then each grower would have maintained control of the workforce and have shared liabilities. However, under the new rule that Department of Labor put out last year, that limits the workers to being on your farm to 34 hours or less. So for a lot of our joint employers that had used that as a way to help kind of with the costs, it eliminated almost all of our joint employers in Michigan because the reality is you need those workers more than 34 hours. The last option that you have is to file as an association. And this is where multiple growers, you form a legal association with the legal documents and you file one application, but then the workers work for the association on any of the farms listed in the association. So some growers that have family members with similar farms or neighbors have tried this route as another way to help with the costs, but you have to go into it knowing that you're sharing that liability and you want to be comfortable and completely okay with that farm's business practices because of that shared liability. What are your requirements as an employer? There are many, but these are the 6 big buckets that we like to kind of group them in. The first of all, and the biggest one that you'll hear about, and the largest from a liability standpoint, is the wage rate. In H-2A, you have to pay what's called the adverse effect wage rate, or we tag it as the AWR. You have to pay the highest of either your state minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, or the AWR. And across the country, in every case, it is the AWR that is the highest wage. In Wisconsin this year, your adverse effect wage rate is the same as it is in Michigan. It's $18.50 an hour. So that's one piece that you have to make sure that your growers, that's the minimum that they have to get. On top of that, you have to provide them free housing that's been inspected and certified by your Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. That is often a step that's the first thing we talk about with growers is, do you have housing? And if not, do you understand what the process is to get your housing licensed and inspected? In addition to that, you have to provide daily transportation to and from the work site. So wherever the housing is for those H-2A workers, you have to provide that transportation to and from, and at least once a week for groceries and essentials. In addition, you have to pay for all of their transportation and subsistence costs. So think housing, hotel, meals, whatnot, while they're in transit from whatever the country they're coming from, as well as all of their transportation costs to get them back home. There is a provision called the 3/4 guarantee, in H2A, and that means you have to guarantee that those H2A guest workers are going to get at least 75% of the hours that you put in the contract, in the work contract. And again, the idea behind this program, when they set it up many years ago, it's been a long time since it's been updated, was the idea that they wanted to protect the domestic workforce and they didn't want these employment visa legal guest workers coming in here and taking jobs from local domestic people. So they wanted to guarantee that the workers will get at least 75% of the hours in the contract. And then the recruitment piece of it that I mentioned before is you as the employer, you have to hire any domestic applicants that show up and meet those requirements that are in the job description through half of the contract. So those are the big employer requirements. There are many more we can discuss, but those are the big things to keep in the back of your mind if you're thinking about H2A. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to pass it to Laura next. Laura's going to kind of go through big picture what our services are as a company.
Hi, everybody. So we offer kind of an a la carte service. So we can do as much of the work or as little of the work as you would like us to do. The first option is to do just the application filing. So we would help you draft it's called the ETA 790. So it's the contract that you file to Department of Labor, and the workers also receive a copy of that contract. It gets filed with the state, it gets filed with Department of Labor and Homeland Security. And then at that point, if you would like us to, we can hand it over to you and you can do recruitment and transportation at that point for your workers. We also are available to do the application filing plus worker recruitment and scheduling. So as I'm going to use Mexico as an example, that's the country that we process from the most. They are required to go to the U.S. consulate, usually in Monterrey, Mexico. There's a few other consulates in Mexico that they could attend, and they need an appointment to get a work visa at that consulate. So we can schedule that for you guys if you would like us to, or you can take the reins from there. We also are available to coordinate that travel and that recruitment of the workers. So travel from their hometown to the consulate to get their visa, and then from the consulate to your farm. And we also provide onboarding. So when the workers arrive to the farm, they need to have an I-9 on file, a W-4, and then we have videos available. Food safety videos, worker protection standards, heat safety. It depends on what your needs are for your farm, but we can make it very specific to your farm. And we also have kind of those general requirements that all farms have to show their workers if they're harvesting fresh produce. And then we're available for additional education, making sure you're compliant with all of the requirements of being an employer. And then when you get audited by Department of Labor, we can be there for support for that Department of Labor audit. The first level, I kind of went through some of this already, the application filing. We would file the application for you, and then once we get that USCIS case number, we'd hand it over to you to handle the rest of the scheduling and getting the workers to the consulate. We also have a Varnum Ag Employer Compliance Guide. So the application filing would include this compliance guide subscription. It's a great website. We're going to go over it a little bit towards the end of our presentation, but it has all of the requirements that you would have as an employer, but it's written out, so you don't have to remember anything. You can just go back and reference with payroll requirements, different things like that. And we'll go over it some more. If you would like us to do the worker recruitment and scheduling, that would also include a subscription to the Ag Employer Compliance Guide. We'd be there for audit support related to that H2A application. handle worker recruitment. So if you have specific workers that you would like to cross from Mexico, we can handle specific names. Or if you come to us and say, hey, I don't have anybody, that I know of or that I'm used to, and I would just need 10 employees to come up and help me harvest my crop. We would work with a recruiter to handle that for you and assign 10 people to your farm. A lot of our team is bilingual. So we offer bilingual orientation for your workers and then that onboarding package. So that includes pre-filled I-9s, pre-filled W-4s, a housing checklist, and different things like that. The taxes for H-2A workers can get a bit complicated. So we have a very in-depth PowerPoint presentation that we would go through with the workers to make sure that they are staying compliant with their taxes and that they understand what their obligations are for taxes. And then this is a screenshot of our compliance guide that I had mentioned earlier. So this is just the login page that you're seeing, but it gives you access to what are your resources and requirements in terms of unemployment, in terms of payroll, guidebooks for compliance with the H-2A system. So when you are transporting workers from the housing to your work site, you have to have the vehicles reviewed. And so we have the forms available on that website for you to take and make sure that your vehicles are compliant for H-2A workers and domestic workers to be riding in. How to manage an on-site audit. So when DOL shows up, what is the paperwork that they're going to ask for and what can you prepare for in terms of questions that Department of Labor is going to ask you. And we also have examples of what audit letters look like.
And Laura, if I can jump in, for those of you watching, you might see some Indianas in parentheses, and Indiana Farm Bureau loved this guide so much. Their Ag Law Foundation, part of Indiana Farm Bureau, said, we want to do an Indiana version. So they partnered and they did an Indiana version of the guide. So their members in Indiana get a lot of all of the same information, which is federal, but then they also have a bunch of specific Indiana information on there as well. So that's something that we can visit with if Wisconsin Farm Bureau is interested in pursuing something like that, or there's a need for this. That's why it shows Michigan and Indiana.
Is this me or is this Emily? I apologize.
Go for it, Laura.
Okay. So we just want to make sure that we're helping you understand H-2A and the requirements that you have as the employer. The first step, if you are looking into the H-2A program, if you've never done it before, first step is always housing, because that's going to take the longest for you to solve in order to move forward with the H-2A program. So if you don't currently have housing, it's something that you would want to definitely start with. That's going to be step one. If you do have housing, we have to make sure that it is licensed by the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. And then also the amount of people that your housing is licensed for is also tied to your H-2A application in terms of that's the amount of visas that you can ask for. So say you have housing for 10 people, but you need 20 people to harvest your crop. You can only ask for 10, which is what your housing is certified for. So that's something you would want to go and find more housing, start building housing, something in order to solve that situation. We like to say that we can do it sooner, but it's going to be the easiest for us and then for you as an employer to plan at that 120 days to 100 day ahead schedule from when you want the workers to arrive to your farm. So the latest that we can file your contract is 60 days before your contract start date. So say April 1st, you need guys on the farm, you want to roll back 60 days, and that's when we can start filing your contract. We can't go later than 60 days, and we can't go earlier than 75 days before. And then prior to all of that actual, like clicking submit to Department of Labor with your contract information, there's a lot of work that goes into that ahead of time. So you need to make sure you know all of your worksite addresses. There's a lot of farms that don't have worksite addresses, so you have to drive around and open your GPS and figure out the GPS coordinates for your work sites. All of that information needs to be listed, your housing address, housing rules, so like no fighting, no visitors, no pets, things like that. And we have templates made ahead of time that we can go through with you to make sure that it's edited to reflect your farm correctly. And we also, last thing, have a management review with Varnum Law. So the first step before you do housing, also obviously, and then also we're going to have that management review with our attorney at Varnum Law. They'll go through all of the requirements that you would have as an employer and make sure that you're understanding what you're getting yourself into for the H-2A program.
Let's take a minute just to look at H-2A on the bigger scale. As far as the H-2A program, it is something that is obviously growing rapidly. More and more people are using it. The numbers are growing really fast. And you can see on the chart, just overall in the US, in 2023, 378,513 jobs. Those are jobs that are certified. Doesn't mean that many people actually crossed the border or came to the farms to work, but those are the total number of jobs that were approved by the Department of Labor. And as far as Wisconsin specifically, last year you were up over 2,800 and have also been growing significantly as well. Regarding the AWR, Sarah talked a little about the adverse effect wage rate. You can see that this is the map for this year, 2024's AWR rates, and we in Wisconsin are 1850. In the yellow, you can see that across the map that not every state is different, or not every state is the same. There are some big disparities depending on what part of the country you are in, and there's lots of reasons and obviously some concerns about that as well. Specifically about the AWR, that cost, or that 1850 for Wisconsin, that data and that information every year is determined by information from the USDA Farm Labor Survey. And as you can see in the last 10 years, that number has increased by 60%, which obviously labor is expensive, but that's a big concern for farmers. And we can have a whole nother workshop on the concerns and the issues regarding the AWR. So we won't spend a ton of time now, but just know that that is unfortunately the scale or the minimum pay that H-2A employers have to give to their workers. And that number continues to increase as we move forward. Then as far as Wisconsin specifically, in 2023, those individual joint employers, as far as number of applications, were at 150 with total workers requested at 1713. And just to Sarah's point earlier, how she mentioned that a lot of the misconceptions is that you have to be a big operation in order to utilize the H-2A program. That really isn't the case, and the numbers tell that story. The average number of workers that are requested it's at 11, with a huge range in between. I think also the telling of over half of the applications that are submitted were for 5 workers or less in the state of Wisconsin last year. And I can tell you just from personal experience with a couple of my clients, the difference that even 2 or 3 workers makes for some of our family farm operations is tremendous. One of my clients was telling me their first year using H-2A, I think they brought 3 or 4 folks, And at the end of the season, they were able to do their end of the season wrap up, get things cleaned up, put away, etc. That they ended up having extra some time that they could actually take a breather before having to gear up for the next season that they hadn't ever had before. And so it was a huge blessing to them. So just to reiterate that really, like, you don't have to have a huge number, even for some of our smaller family farms, that the difference of a handful of workers can have a huge impact. Another question that we often get is, what kind of jobs are these folks doing? In Wisconsin, in the last few years, there are two big job categories that a lot of the H-2A workers fit in. The first one is the farm workers and laborers. These are your general farm workers. A lot of them are working in horticulture crops, orchards, specialty crops, etc. And if you think about any part of the production process for these growers, from the soil prep, planting, weeding, all of the way through to harvest, putting away, really, and anything in between. They are doing all of it, and all of those types of job duties fit into this farm worker laborer category. There also are a significant amount of applications that are filed under ag equipment operators. These are workers that are operating equipment. Some of our row crop farmers, like for the planting, harvesting, operating combines, big machinery. We have some that are hauling manure on dairies and working, doing other machinery work, etc. Not to say that's all you can do. There are also several different types of jobs that also fit under H-2A. You can see kind of a list here of some of the other job titles that have had approved applications from Wisconsin and around the country. Farm mechanic, graders and sorters, supervisors, etc. So as long as they fit into the agriculture umbrella, and as long as there is a seasonal component to the work, those are the big requirements that determine if that job or that job duty could be done by an H-2A worker. With that, I think that is the information that we have. I'm going to turn it back over to Wendy and Sarah as far as for questions or any other things that you all might want to talk about.
Did we have any questions posted in the chat, or does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask us a question? I know, Wendy, you said about 30 minutes, so that's what we did. We've got time then for Q&A or conversation.
Yeah, if anyone has a question, please feel free to take yourself off mute, ask your question, or if you want to put it in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. The awkward silence.
And if not, that's fine too.
All right. Well, we can provide the contact information for Sarah and Emily for follow-up from the Lunch and Learn today. So we will do that. And we will also provide a recording to anyone who was unable to make it today. I know we have lots of people with the nice weather out and about. So thank you for tuning in. And we hope that you all have a great rest of the day. Thank you.